Thank you so much for joining, everyone. We are talking today about solar benefits for owners and tenants of affordable housing. This is the second webinar in a three-part series that Rob Crowderoff and Crowderoff Solar and Sive, Paget, and Riesel are hosting. My name is Alexis Saba. I'm an attorney at Sive, Paget, and Riesel, which is environmental and energy law firm. So the three-part series is about solar issues for the real estate industry overall. The panel that we'll do after this one is focused on kind of projecting into the future about how the recent election and New York City's slate of elections next year will impact the solar industry. But for today, we're talking about affordable housing, and there's a lot to get through. So feel free to submit your questions as we go through the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to those mostly at the end unless there's something that is particularly relevant in the moment. Matthew Hall will be our moderator for the panel. He's a partner at Goldstein Hall and focuses on affordable housing, nonprofit law, corporate law, real estate financing, all of that fun stuff, and also lectures a fair amount on those topics as well. So he is well equipped to guide us through this panel today. So Matt, I'll turn it over to you and you can introduce our speakers.
Okay, all right, thanks Alexis. As you mentioned, we have it's a 1 hour action-packed presentation here. It really is the intersection of solar benefits with affordable housing, which to me is like the two ingredients that make the perfect concoction. So we, as a firm, our firm is, we have a location, I'm here in DC. Our main location is New York City. We have an upstate office. We've actually started to do a couple large scale, we've had 2 large scale solar closings in the affordable housing context in 2020. We have several more in the pipeline for 2021. And I think we're looking at, with the change in administration, there should be a lot of good things coming together to do quite a bit of solar in the upcoming year. So this seminar is particularly timely because we're going to go through and look at not only the legislative landscape and you'll hear from Chris Rogers from NYSERDA about some of the programs, but then we'll also go to more of the practitioner component of like actually how to do it and the pitfalls and the challenges and actually getting to a project. And that's really the ultimate goal of this presentation. All right, so I'll moderate. We're going to start off with, as I mentioned, Chris Rogers. He's a project manager with NYSERDA. He'll do about 10 minutes. His role is really to connect affordable housing with solar opportunities. So he'll provide some background and context of the overall marketplace. And then we'll switch to Rob. So 10 minutes there. And then Rob Crowderoff. Rob's been, most of you probably know him well, since 2013. He's the guy that you go to actually get the project done, to actually figure out like, how do I underwrite this? How do I go put my financing together? He's the person to help execute. After Rob, we'll switch over to Anavelka Cordova. Anavelka is with Lemle and Wolf, one of our favorite people at the Goldstein Hall office, and she's one of our favorite clients. She has been there since 2011 and really, skyrocketed up the chain and doing quite a number of projects. And so she'll go through one of the solar installations that they're working on. And then we'll conclude with Fred Zollner, Fred's a legend in the affordable housing field, mostly upstate, and works with Christopher Community. And he'll talk about more of the offsite community solar component, whereas Anavelka will do on-site community solar. So as Alexis mentioned, if you wouldn't mind, put your comments and questions into the Q&A box as we go. We're going to do about 10 minutes per speaker, and then in the end, we'll try to go through and address many questions as possible. All right, take it away, Chris.
Thanks, Matt. And just confirming that you guys can hear me. I can get started. Great. And so my name is Chris Rogers. I'm a project manager at the New York Sun team at NYSERDA, which is just the solar team. We focus on the different programs and incentives that focus on developing and promoting new grid connected solar systems. And so in my presentation, I'm going to talk through, well, starting with I guess the most important background that underlines what has been driving changes to the programs focused on the low to moderate income community, and in particular within the solar department, focusing on solar projects that will benefit low to moderate income households and the community, and then going into a little bit of what the plan developments are for the future, and what the current layout is now for incentives. And so if you can go forward a couple slides. Yep. So what's really driving everything is the Community Leadership and Community Protection Act, or the CLCPA, which was passed last year. That ultimately led to a new petition by NYSERDA that was focused on increasing the benefits to disadvantaged communities to a minimum of 35% of overall benefits, and included a request for $200 million of additional funding. That was approved in May of this year, and that's what's really driving the planned expansion and changes in the programs that are focused on just basically incentives that will benefit the low to moderate income community in general. I focus on solar, but our energy affordability and equity team is focused on a wide range of programs that will impact workforce development as well as energy efficiency as well. And so what we are terming the solar energy equity framework, it's a two-part strategy that focuses both on utility managed programs and NYSERDA managed programs, incentives and adders that stack with the existing framework that subsidizes the cost of new grid connected energy systems via the New York Sun incentives that pays out at I guess a dollar per watt incentive. Next slide. And so just to put in a context of where we stand right now in terms of the funding that has gone out and the support to disadvantaged and low to moderate income community, on the one hand, we have the PON 3414, the Affordable Solar and Storage Pre-Development and Technical Assistance Program that has paid out or has granted about $2.7 million to projects that are spread across the state, about half within the Con Edison service territory, about the remaining half overwhelmingly in the upstate region, as well as projects in Long Island or PSEG Long Island service territory. There's also the Solar for All program, which is NYSERDA's low-income community solar program that provides a benefit on average of $15 a month to low-income customers. About $11.6 million in funding has been committed to that program. And then the added incentives, both to, which folks will be most interested here, to multifamily affordable housing, as well as single-family residential households. To date, we've committed about, I guess it's, that stat I think is about a month old, but it's over $12 million has been committed to regulated affordable housing as well as single family residential households. And so now I want to talk about, I guess, a little bit more about these main programs and what we're planning to do to expand them. So next slide. And so starting with PON 3414, I refer to it, a lot of people refer to it as the pre-development program. And this program provides grants that will aid in the early stage development of solar and storage projects that either will benefit multifamily affordable housing or community solar projects that will benefit low to moderate income households. And so as part of the expansion supported by the new funding, the Solar Energy Equity Framework, and guided by the CLCPA, what we've done was that initially it was a program that was solely focused on solar. We've expanded the storage to be an approved technology. We've revamped the program to a new quarterly submission schedule. We've revamped the application process, all with the goal. And in addition to, and what's not stated here is additional funding was added to the program so that we could support it through the new target overall of 6 gigawatts of solar are to be installed in New York by 2025. That was an increase of 3 gigawatts of solar by 2022. And so, we're really pushing forward the benefits to low to moderate income households and disadvantaged communities by that deadline. And the funding, we believe, will allow us to support projects through that timeline. There's also the Revitalize program, which focuses on community-based organizations and helps them aid to a different type of planning and strategizing for a variety of clean energy projects. And what we're planning for the future will be to expand the outreach and to use that to expand outreach to low to moderate income communities, as well as to grow the Revitalize program further. And we're still in the early stages of that, and so we don't have anything to announce at this stage. But for those who are familiar with the Revitalize program, we haven't forgotten about it, and we're continuing to work on it. Next slide. So we recently had a webinar where we spoke about low to moderate income incentives that were focused on community solar, which will also benefit multifamily affordable housing, depending on where these projects are cited. So in addition to the Solar for All program, where over 2,000 customers are currently receiving credits on their utility bills each month right now, we're also planning on rolling out a new pilot program with National Grid that would essentially duplicate the Solar for All program, where National Grid will be procuring, they're going to issue an RFP, they're going to basically procure capacity from community solar projects within their service territory, and then it will be integrated within their basically their equivalent of their low to moderate income program. It's called the EAP program, they refer to it, but basically if you're eligible for HEAP and you're currently receiving utility bill assistance, what National Grid is going to do is they're going to put out an RFP. They're going to secure the capacity of a lot of community solar projects, and then they will allocate that capacity to low-income customers. Next slide. We've got a few more details on that one, and this is what we had a webinar. I believe it was in the end of September where we spoke about this. When the National Grid service territory alone, we're anticipating that will result in around 500 megawatts of additional community solar that will impact 140,000 low-income households in the National Grid service territory. In addition to the National Grid pilot program, we're also in the process of designing an LMI community solar adder, and that would impact community solar projects that dedicate a certain amount of capacity to low to moderate income households, including those located in regulated affordable housing statewide. We're still in the process of designing what this program will be. There are plans for there to be an RFI, request for information, where we're seeking impact both from I guess solar developers, as well as different stakeholders within the low to moderate income community, to get an idea of what will be the scope of or the size of what will be an adder. Basically, it'll be an additional $1 per watt that will pay out for projects that are dedicating a certain capacity to low to moderate income households that are committing to a certain bill credit discount, meaning that they're going to have to confirm that there will be savings to these households. And so we're still in the process of designing that, and we anticipate that will impact an additional 25 to 50,000 low to moderate income households across the state. And so the next slide. And then I wanted to speak about I guess for those who have worked on solar projects that are cited on regulated affordable housing, the multifamily affordable housing adder, which was changed essentially to lock in a $1 per watt incentive up to a cap of 200 kilowatts for projects that are cited on regulated affordable housing. That is, projects that have some form of regulatory agreement with an oversight authority, whether that be HPD, HDC, HCR, HUD. There are a few other different programs that are those are the main ones, but I think OTDA also has a few programs that would qualify for that as well. And while initially there was a different incentive for projects that are located in the Con Edison service territory in upstate. We've removed the distinction, and now the incentive just automatically adjusts to maintain that dollar per watt in incentive. There's also a slightly higher incentive for projects that commit to 100% of the capacity going to both regulated affordable housing, and at least 60% of that going specifically to LMI, individual LMI households, meaning that I guess no more than 40% could go to a common area meter at regulated affordable housing. If you commit to a certain utility bill discount amount, then it's $1.15 a watt incentive that was recently introduced. Next slide. This next slide is just a chart just to illustrate, I guess, what it was initially or how it works now. It's basically, if there is a solar project that is sited on regulated affordable housing, the amount that will go to the New York Sun approved contractor it's going to be a dollar per watt as long as solar incentives remain. So for those who are familiar, we have a declining block structure as more projects come online. The overall incentive for projects decreases. Their projects, I mean, this is a good problem that projects have been completed at an accelerating rate. And so, last year, a project on multifamily affordable housing or small commercial project would have received 50 cents a watt in the Con Edison service territory, where I think we're down to around 35 cents a watt right now. I'd have to, but the blocks are filling up quickly. And previously that had the unintended impact of, well, while we were intending to encourage the adoption of solar, I guess owners and managers of multifamily affordable housing are operating on a different timeline. They're not going to rearrange their entire capital structure so that they can develop solar projects because the megawatt blocks are declining. And so by changing this so that it automatically adjusts, we're hoping that this will allow more projects that will be sited on regulated affordable housing to be completed, because it can be, you don't have to complete it. You're not penalized if you don't get a project in the next few months as these blocks go down, because the adder will compensate for that difference. And so that's
Great,
yeah.
It's very perfect timing. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll switch over to Rob for an overview.
Thank you, Chris. Today I'd like to speak about three different aspects, building on all the work that Chris and the folks at NYSERDA are doing to incentivize solar on affordable housing. I'll talk about the regulations, some of the industry barriers and opportunities, as well as a high-level overview of community solar, what it is, how it works, to tee up Fred and Annabelle. A brief background about us: we are active in solar in three different capacities. One is as consultants and owners representatives for property owners who want to purchase their own solar systems. Secondly, as community solar developers to come in and provide a no-cost solution to property owners for community solar. And third, we broker community solar subscriptions for folks in upstate New York and New Jersey. We've been doing this a while. Our team has a lot of experience across the board, from design, finance, and construction. And we really distinguish ourselves through innovative deal structuring and focusing on regulatory compliance. Next slide. We've been at it with affordable housing for a long time, for more than 7 years, with a long range of partners who, we've learned a lot through our dedicated and sustained partnerships across the board, and are also grateful for NYSERDA for their continued support for our projects. Next slide. So to talk about the regulations for a minute, then as Chris mentioned, there's the Climate Leadership and Climate Protection Act at the state level that has provided a lot of requirements and goals to advance renewable energy energy efficiency and solar to impact low income, low and moderate income communities, and affordable housing being a part of that. At the same time, 2019 was a big year for climate legislation. We see the New York City Climate Mobilization Act, a set of local laws passed that require carbon emission caps, as well as a building code change, which is the most immediate implication for solar on affordable housing. This was in the form of Local Law 94 that requires solar on any new roof structure as well. But there is a carve out for affordable housing. HPD was provided a 5-year window to develop a plan and require solar where it's feasible. HPD's policy currently is requiring an analysis for any project that's going to receive funding through HPD, and projects with a 10-year payback period or less are going to be required to incorporate solar into their projects. Chris spoke about some of the major commitments from NYSERDA in terms of increased funding, so that's a big deal. Including the pre-development grant program that's up to $200,000 per applicant. So there's some substantial resources available to help in the pre-development as well as the development process. By 2024, however, the building code will require the solar projects on all new affordable housing roofs, as well as any other roof in the city. So there's that window will close. And conveniently enough, by 2025, the generous programs that NYSERDA offers are scheduled to run out. So now's a great time to consider making those improvements. The market for solar on affordable housing is really bifurcated in around new construction and retrofits. New construction, the numbers look great. Can fold in solar into the LIHTC basis. There's a solar investment tax credit worth 30% of the value of a project. You stack those two incentives, and most of the time solar is going to make sense. Almost all affordable housing developers in the city have experience developing or considering developing solar on their new construction buildings. Budgets can get tight, but by and large, we see strong paybacks. In retrofit, it's a very different conversation. Cash deals don't generally pencil out without tax credits, which I'll talk about those challenges in a minute. However, there's a huge opportunity. The existing portfolios of affordable housing providers are vast. RAD developments and other retrofits and acquisitions can really provide a huge boost to affordable housing if we can figure this out. So next slide, please. A couple lessons from working with our partners at Enterprise and National Housing Trust through a grant funded by NYSERDA upon 3414 that Chris was mentioning. We provided technical assistance to more than 20 affordable housing organizations across the state over a 2-year time frame. The focus was retrofits, and we initially were really thinking about ownership and how can affordable housing providers own their own solar on their portfolios. We found there are a lot of barriers to this, however. Self-financing without ownership, tax appetite may not be attractive. The ability to secure external tax equity is very difficult, and the numbers frequently don't look very good at the end of the day, in addition to the risk that's required to actually secure those tax credit benefits from a third party. Secondly, so for nonprofits, that really is in most instances going to keep projects from moving forwards. For for-profit affordable housing portfolios, you can still see tax appetite can be limited for those for-profit entities. Also, the ability to take the accelerated depreciation isn't always there. So again, we see pretty limited returns in a lot of instances. And the third lesson, however, is that there's an emerging field of community solar that can provide a huge upside for affordable housing providers to be able to capture the benefits of solar without incurring the risks or the costs. So I'll actually skip over, well, briefly, if you can take advantage of all the tax credits and incentives, numbers can look really good. A very quick case study, we see a very typically sized solar system, about 45 kilowatts. A project of ours that was able to take advantage of the tax credits, depreciation, property tax abatement, as well as NYSERDA incentives, see 17% IRR and 6-year payback. So if you can take advantage of the incentives, by and large, do it. But in many instances, that's not the case. So let's give a quick overview of community solar. There are 2 ways that an affordable housing provider can take advantage of community solar. The first is as a subscriber. And the major opportunity here is in upstate New York, where there are many community solar fields that are being built, and these projects actively need subscribers. This can be an easy transaction for an affordable housing provider. So the simple mechanics is that a property owner needs to sign a subscription agreement with a community solar provider. This is in upstate New York. This is subscribing to an off-site, usually solar project in a large field, maybe 25 to 30 acres or more. Solar panels from this project, in essence, are dedicated to the electric account of the subscriber. So what does this mean? There are bill credits that are provided on your utility bill, and so the utility bill is reduced by the value of those bill credits. In turn, there's another bill that's provided by the community solar provider, worth 90% of the value of those credits, and you keep 10% of the savings. So to run through a quick example.
2 minutes, Rob.
What's that?
2 minutes.
Great, okay. So a quick example, suppose you're allocated the equivalent of 50 solar panels that generate $1,000 of bill credits in a given month. You receive a reduction of $1,000 on your February electric bill. In turn, you pay the community solar $900 and you keep the $100 in savings. That's the essence of this model. Next slide. The other model is an aggregated approach at the rooftop, at the portfolio level on rooftops for affordable housing. Anavelka will speak about this in more detail. This is a third-party financed, owned, and operated system, so there's no cost to the affordable housing provider. The benefits are guaranteed and can be stacked in terms of lease income, bill credit discount, an upfront one-time payment, and if properties have property tax liability, then that can be kept with the properties as well. This is viable in the New York City area based on the fact there's a higher bill credit value, so there's more money that can go into a project in the city, so the higher cost of rooftop solar can be justified, whereas you really need that large solar field that you're going to see in upstate New York for the subscriptions. There is the potential for solar plus storage as well, so that's an emerging field, but there's some real opportunity there. And we are partnering with a company called Oya Solar, that's one of the major community solar providers in upstate New York, and have a pool of 47 projects around the city right now to develop community solar with affordable housing providers at the portfolio scale. So at that, I'd like to transition.
Okay, let's go right over to Anavelka.
Right.
Talk about that model.
Okay, great. Thank you. Again, my name is Anavelka. I'm a principal at Lemle & Wolf. I focus primarily on the development side of our business. We manage all aspects of project financing, pre-development activities, construction management, and overall supervision of development projects in our company. Next slide. So here I just want to give you a little bit overview of Lemle & Wolf, our company. The company was established a long time ago in 1938, mostly as an owner-manager of real estate. We're located in Upper Manhattan, Washington Heights, and Inwood neighborhoods. Around the 70s, the company began to participate in programs that were aimed at preserving affordable housing units in partnership with the city. And since then, we've continued to expand on that model and grow our capabilities, not just as property managers, but also on the development and constructions of affordable housing. We continue to be very active in the preservation and redevelopment of existing units, and have a pretty strong pipeline also on the new construction of affordable housing units as well. Today, we manage 6,000 units in 250 buildings across Upper Manhattan, Harlem, and the Bronx. Next slide. So here, just want to give you a little bit of overview of our solar projects. Given our focus on preservation over the years, we have really tried to work to incorporate renewable energy in some of our projects whenever it's been feasible. So our approach has been to incorporate, for instance, solar thermal and solar PV installations in projects that have been approved for a larger repositioning with either a substantial or moderate renovation scopes through different affordable housing programs with the city. We have done it with LIHTC, low-income housing tax credits. We've also done it with just straight loan programs like the participation loan program. And more recently, we completed one under HPD's Green Housing Preservation Program, which is more of a moderate rehab program that I know is pretty new to HPD. So we did complete one solar PV project. To date, we've installed 4 solar thermal systems, and this year our first solar PV system, which is featured in the picture, in the second picture down below there on the right. And yeah, it's all great projects, pretty successful projects, but we have faced some challenges. The number one challenge is, these projects have been great, but again, we want to do more. We have an appetite to try to do more of these, and it's just been a real challenge. It can't be replicated for some of the reasons that Rob mentioned, and I'll get into here. It just can't be replicated on a portfolio level. We haven't found a way to really do it. The upfront costs are really too high, so that's a barrier. For some of our substantial rehab projects that have significant scopes up front, the agency will not approve these installations up front. When you try to integrate it with the overall energy incentives that you may be doing, if it leads to being significantly over subsidy, it's just the first thing that goes. So that's been a real challenge. And then at the back end, after installing these, after the first 5-year term of the maintenance agreements, some of the companies have, experienced changes, and sometimes placing another 5 years with a different company has been a challenge for us on the maintenance side. So I think that's also a little bit of a barrier. And I think Rob also alluded to the fact that, on the financing side, some of the tax incentives are not always beneficial for owners. So that's sometimes can be a hard sell given, such a high upfront cost. Next slide. So given the challenges that I just mentioned, and the fact that I truly believe that we have a really nice mix of older and new construction buildings that are viable candidates for solar, it led me to consider community solar as an option for our portfolio. And I started to delve into it a little bit more through one of our partners, Enterprise. And we were pretty soon after that introduced to Rob, and in the summer decided to partner with Rob and Oya Solar to begin planning and designing a Lemle portfolio community solar project, which is what we're in the midst of trying to accomplish. The current scope consists of 29 affordable multifamily buildings with 1,380 units. The average site that we are looking at will probably have a 31 kilowatt system for a total of 892 kilowatts across the portfolio, which is very exciting. Next slide. So the key benefits that we see are obviously the lease payments upfront, as well as the initial upfront one-time payment that is offered, that's negotiated. This is a new source of revenue for the buildings, which obviously can support the building improvements in the future. And if it's paired with the property tax abatement as well, it's a huge benefit. Some of the buildings, again, as I mentioned, are older, so they may have, J51 tax incentive benefits that, with these, that can be paired with the solar tax abatement. So that's a huge opportunity to add more of those benefits to the buildings. Also, a big one is being able to have residents subscribes and participate in utility savings. This is something that in the models that we have been able to implement, we haven't been able to take advantage of. We have not been able to offer the residents an opportunity to subscribe. So this is also a huge plus, especially in this environment, if we can add that additional, offer that additional opportunity for residents, during any environment, actually, during any economic environment, but especially this one. Finally, not being responsible for day-to-day maintenance, as I mentioned, is also a key for us, and it will be a welcome sort of change. And in terms of timing and next steps, as I mentioned, we're currently in the design phase of the project. We believe it's going to take between 3 to 6 months, which will put us into potential installation at the second quarter of 2021, and hopefully completion sometime in 2022. So those are my brief comments. I think with that, I'll turn it over to Fred.
Thanks, Ana Valka. Perfect timing. All right, Fred.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna start my timer. Sorry. Okay, hi everybody. Fred Zola. I'm located in Syracuse, New York. If you could go to the next slide, we'll introduce Christopher Community. I'm a former vice president for development for Christopher Community, kind of retired, and I'm sticking with them, working on trying to bring solar to the projects. Christopher Community was founded back in the 1970s, really in response to the availability of the HUD 202 program. Its mission was to develop and manage low and moderate income housing where there was a need across upstate New York. As of now, Christopher Community has over 100 buildings, ranging from single family houses to 2-family houses to 100-unit high-rises. Christopher Community manages 3,000 plus units. It also administers the Section 8 program for Onondaga County. So there are 1,200 vouchers involved there. As I said, I'm located in Syracuse. We refer to it as Central New York. Most of our projects are within a 100-mile radius. I don't know how many people here attending, at this webinar are from upstate New York, in upstate New York. But we go all the way from Utica to Rochester to Watertown to Elmira. Next slide, please. So about 3 years ago, we at Christopher Community decided we wanted to bring solar to our projects and to our tenants with the obvious goals of reducing costs, reducing our carbon footprint, and also reducing the costs for our tenants. During the course of that 3-year period, trying to, figuring out how we could do solar, I think we learned a lot of the lessons that Rob reviewed for what relevant for upstate New York projects. The project we were working on was really to bring solar to our existing portfolio rather than the new construction. I do think with HCR and NYSERDA incentives, the new projects coming online will probably have solar built into them. But we're talking about our 3,000 units of existing housing. And they are spread all across upstate in northern New York, central and northern New York. And we started off with the kind of naive idea that we could do rooftop solar on all our projects. And so we started, exploring the possibility, whether those roofs worked for solar or not. So we really engaged an Ithaca-based engineering firm, which reviewed all our roofs and basically found that only about half of them were reasonably oriented even for solar use. And so many of them weren't appropriate for rooftop installations. Some of the roofs are older and would have needed to be replaced before possibly putting on rooftop installation. Obviously, it became clear we couldn't achieve any economy of scale with small rooftops and spread across a broad geographical range. And we also just found that there were just utility issues. I mean, not every location could tie into the grid, and the utility company was really not very helpful in discussing that with us. So, we really came to the conclusion that self-developed rooftop solar, wasn't practical. It would not work for us. We also explored the possibility of doing a self-developed solar farm that, that would have been developed by Christopher Community. We thought we have a lot of experience doing low-income housing tax credit, housing development. Thought maybe we could put together the expertise with outside accountants and solar builders and local engineering firms and so on. But really realized that you really needed the expertise to interface with the utility company, satisfy their the requirements, the regulatory requirements, and ultimately the biggest problem we had with thinking about doing our own solar farm was finding a site and realizing that site plan approval and utility company approval really required the expertise of solar developers that we as a housing developer really we're not going to be able to do that development. So with that, we really connected through Enterprise, again with Rob, and we explored some of those possibilities and really started talking about the community solar approach. And on this slide, so we're in both National Grid territory and NYSEG territory. We're working with Rob and Oya on a project which has a scope which includes 35 of our housing projects because they're in the NYSEG and National Grid territories for a total project scope of 2.5 megawatts of solar. Next slide, please. So as I described, we started with three models. We explored three different models: self-finance, own and operate; self-finance of rooftop solar; self-finance of off-site solar; and we settled on third-party community solar subscriptions. Again, to summarize, the challenges with rooftop solar, clearly the location of the roofs was outside of our core business. Of course, as Rob described, lack of tax appetite as a nonprofit. Christopher Community is a nonprofit and a management company. So both no ability to utilize the low-income housing tax credits, and also very limited ability to borrow money against the equity in the properties. At one point in time, we did actually apply for PON 3413 money from NYSERDA to do some of this pre-development work. But I think we were at the end of the initial financing and didn't get any funding. Next slide, please. So we've settled on the community solar approach. we are guaranteed 10% savings. Bill credits, as Rob described. We'll continue to get a bill from the utility, and then a credit with a credit for the full value of the solar, and then a separate bill for 90% of that. We're anticipating $1 million savings over a 25-year period. The real benefit for us was that there's no operations or maintenance. There's no construction necessary on our buildings, no disruption to our, for our tenants and for our management of the projects that are ongoing. I mean, it really just requires a simple subscription agreement with OIA, and the credits will go directly against the bills that we have. So the portfolio that we're signing up for really are going to be the house meters for these 35 projects. We decided, although our goal is to lower costs, so it'll lower operating costs of the projects and benefit the tenants that way. We're hoping to be able to lower the utility costs of our tenants, who all have their own utility accounts. We found that was impractical because their accounts are small, but we're looking forward in the future to consolidated billing, which is something that the PSC has, I think, mandated that the utilities start doing. And at that point in time, we would hope to sign up our individual low and moderate income tenants for the savings that are available there. The possibility of also taking advantage of the NYSERDA programs that we described earlier. We certainly will look into that to benefit our tenants. And just, I think that's the end of my presentation.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Fred. All right. So we have about 9 minutes, and I have a question lined up for each one of the panelists. Let me start with you, Fred, first. In this model, I guess I'm looking at it, I'm thinking to myself, is there any real risk to Christopher community on pursuing this model, other than, I guess, staff time and the resources to work with OIA and Kreuteroff? Is there a financial risk? Is there any other risk out there?
No, there really is no financial risk at all. And I mean, there is no financial risk, and that's important because I didn't mention, and this is probably true across the board for affordable housing developers, each project is an independent legal entity, has a separate ownership and a separate ownership board. And based on the legal structure, the sole developer, OIA, is requiring that each legal entity separately approve the subscription agreement. So the biggest burden for Christopher community in accessing these savings is having each individual legal entity review the project, understand how community solar works, and then approve the contract. So
what about getting lender and investor approval if you needed to? I think if there was going to be rooftop installation, we would have needed limited partner approval, regulatory agreement approval, regulatory entity approval. Here we're really just lowering the utility costs. It's like signing up for an ESCO, which has required other approvals. But one thing I might suggest to other affordable housing owners, managers, developers out there, to put into your management agreement that you are an agent to acquire energy services on behalf of the owner of the building that you might be managing under contract, because Christopher community did not have that in their form management agreements, but I think I think going forward it would be a good idea to add that. Great, thank you, Fred. Okay, let me go back to let me go back to Chris. So Chris, Rob, I think Rob had mentioned that NYSERDA looks like funding isn't secured after a couple of years now. I mean, what are you guys talking about within NYSERDA about the next couple of years? What are things looking like?
Regarding
Just
for
funding, like, just goals, are you, and especially how it intersects with affordable housing?
so really the biggest increase in funding was following the petition, following the enactment of the CLCPA, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. As it stands right now, that it's too early to say whether or not there would be any funding changes for overall programs, incentives, adders. I think we're kind of at the level that we're at. The funding for NYSERDA is unique among government agencies in that we're funded by the surcharge on electricity bills and not as part of, it's not something that's voted on every year by the state legislature. And so that insulates from larger swings and changes in the overall program funding, but it also means that the process for changing that it's different than it would be for other government agencies. But we're basically operating under the assumption that the increase that we got in May is that should be all we have through the goals of the program of 6 gigawatts installed statewide by 2025.
It's excellent. So it seems like things are going to be good for 2021 and onward.
Yeah, it's I'll say this, that when there was an industry-wide shutdown as a result of COVID early in the year, and the solar industry really rebounded across the state a lot quicker than we thought it was going to. When there was the pause orders that halted all in-person activities, there was there's a lot going on, with an important caveat that obviously other things are more important, human health and safety, but the projects have really been, the development, especially of upstate community solar projects, has really accelerated in the past few years. And so, that we plan for funding to exist through 2025, but that is entirely dependent upon how quickly funds get exhausted, how quickly these blocks fill up. And they've been filling up very, very quickly, especially with the community credit, the community adder, and then new incentives and adders that we've been introducing. So 2021, yes, and we hope to see that. We hope to see that growth, and we're really trying to adapt the incentives so that we don't lock, funding goes to projects that are going to happen, and we move it away from projects that aren't going forward.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks, Chris. So Rob, for a nonprofit organization that's been struggling with their budget through the COVID period, and they're looking at doing a solar model, how do you get over that hurdle of helping them to actually execute the project? Because I'm sure a lot of executive directors are saying, this sounds great, but I'm having a hard enough time just kind of keeping my mission together.
Right. Yep. Well, the first step is to look at what the opportunity is, right? So are we looking at a project in upstate New York? Is it downstate? And actually, quickly, Matt, before answering your question, I do want to call out the fact that though Christopher Community wasn't awarded funding through the PON 3414, then through Enterprise, we were supported, and our time with Christopher Community was supported, and it really enabled us to continue working with Christopher Community over an extended period of time to work through a couple models until we figured out that the subscription model would be effective. So I do just want to provide that shout out to the fact that the grant program ultimately did wind up supporting that project in a substantial way. So I think there's the benefit now that we've been working with affordable housing providers for several years, and to say, well, what's the opportunity around the portfolio? So we take a look at the list of buildings, the size of buildings, the basic information about the roofs, and then we can pretty quickly get an understanding of the economic benefit for the project. In the city, then of course we're looking at roof size and potential system size, and the way that we've structured the deals is to provide commercial terms that can be leveraged for the building entities, as well as there's some direct benefit for the property, for the umbrella housing organization. So we've structured it in a way that we're wanting to support everybody that's involved in the project, and then we really worked through the key steps of evaluation and analysis, where there's some effort that's going to be required by the asset management team to pull the bills, to coordinate site visits, for example, and ultimately lender investor approval if we're looking at a rooftop system. But we've really looked at making the process as easy as possible, having documents that are prepared for those lenders and investors, really having a turnkey process for the housing provider. So I would say there is some work, but we've sort of like the question you asked, Fred, we've really looked to de-risk the project and provide a clear upside to the housing owner, and making sure there's some benefit in the immediate term, as well as long-term benefits to the properties.
Thanks. And Ivelka, sorry, 1 minute left for you before we turn over to Alexis. When you were looking at doing this project, like, how did you make that determination that the juice is worth the squeeze? It was really this is a go to, you wanted to do this.
Well, I think for me, it was all of the benefits that we've talked about, looking at, again, the upfront incentives, the benefits that will ultimately go to the residents. I think in terms of really estimating the full return profile, that's still in development phase in terms of the project, because we're still determining feasibility of all of the different buildings that we've identified. But we have a potential that works for us. And again, we wanted to have a project like this that provided these additional opportunities, unlike what we did before with solar, with the first few solar projects that we've done. So this really presented a different approach, which once we've kind of gotten into the economics of it, they're starting to pencil. So again, I think the key is making sure that all of the buildings are feasible in the way that we hope that they are, that the roof structures are working. We're also trying to get creative around how to structure the documents. We selected buildings in particular that where Lemle owners are a majority owner and have a controlling interest in those buildings, which should help in the approval process. So again, that's been our selection process in trying to identify the units or the buildings that we think will work, and and fingers crossed.
Great.
Right?
Great, thank you so much. All right, Alexis, I'll turn it over to you. And can you also make sure, like, if people have questions they want to follow up, where are they supposed to? How do they reach out to our different panelists?
Yep. So thanks, Matt, and to all of our panelists, as well as everyone for joining. We will follow up in the next few days with a copy of the slides, everyone's contact information, and a copy of the recording of the webinar, so you can review it, pass it along, whatever. Visit the Rooftop Solar website to register for the final panel in the 3-part series on solar for the real estate industry. That final panel will be on December 17th. So thanks so much again, and I'll look out for the follow-up email so you can get in touch with other questions. Thanks, all.
Thank you.